June 4th, 1943. We're at the Recreation Hall in Camp Hearne, Texas. Oberleutnant Hermann Fischer's fountain pen trembled as he scribbled in his hidden journal, thoughts that would have gotten him beaten by his own SS guards back in Africa. The Americans are showing us their films, not propaganda reels, but real Hollywood movies. What we saw tonight just can't be real. No nation at war has this kind of capability. Through that makeshift theater's projection beam, he witnessed something that shattered 4 years of Nazi indoctrination. 200 German officers from Rommel's defeated Afrika Korps sat glued to the screen as Vivian Leigh lit up Gone with the Wind, a film about America's own Civil War, their defeat and reconstruction. That technical spectacle, the orchestral score, the sheer scale of the production blew away men who thought American culture was just jazz and gangster flicks. In Germany, Goebbels' film industry could barely make black-and-white propaganda. But here, in what Nazi leaders called a mongrel nation of cultural inferiors, prisoners watched a 4-hour epic that cost $3.85 million to make, more than the entire German film industry's annual budget. Just one day earlier, 1,850 veterans of Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps stepped off a passenger train into Hearne. The whole small Texas town turned out to watch them arrive. What none of them knew was that this moment would spark the most unexpected psychological transformation in military detention history, a systematic rebuilding of Nazi minds through the hypnotic power of Hollywood's Dream Factory. Ideological conversion wasn't happening in interrogation rooms. It was happening in dark theaters where American films flickered on wooden walls, telling stories that shattered everything these soldiers believed about their enemies, their homeland, and the world order they'd fought to build. The surrender started back on May 13, 1943, in Tunisia. General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, who'd replaced the legendary Rommel, surrendered with around 275,000 German and Italian soldiers. The Wehrmacht's elite desert warriors, the men who'd pushed the British back to El Alamein and earned Churchill's respect, were suddenly prisoners. Among them was Hauptmann Wilhelm Richter, a Knight's Cross holder and veteran of Poland and France. Their journey from capture to revelation began in North African transit camps. As Richter and thousands of other POWs waited for transport ships, American efficiency already started chipping away at their preconceptions. But nothing prepared them for what they'd find in America's heartland, not just the material abundance, but the cultural sophistication of a nation they'd been taught to hate. The first hint came on the Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic. In the enlisted men's mess, they'd set up a projector. Feldwebel Otto Kraus, captured with the 15th Panzer Division, later remembered, on the ship to America, they showed us a film, Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator. German soldiers watching a Jewish actor mock the Führer. We didn't know if we should be offended or amazed. Most of us had never seen Chaplin. His films were banned in Germany since 1933. Prisoners had private radios, and movies played up to 4 nights a week. If the camp didn't have a projector, prisoners often pooled their savings to buy one. The American military had discovered something remarkable. Hollywood films were more effective than any propaganda lecture at showing American values and capabilities. Fast forward to August 15, 1943, at Camp Clinton, Mississippi. The base had just finished building a theater, built by the prisoners themselves, that could seat hundreds. 25 generals were housed there, along with colonels, majors, and captains. General Gustav von Verst, one of the highest-ranking German officers at Clinton, stood at the back of the hall as the lights dimmed for the first screening. The film was Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was incomprehensible, von Verst later recalled. Here was an American film showing corruption in their own government, a naive man fighting their political system, newspapers attacking their leaders. In Germany, a film like that would mean death for everyone involved. Yet they showed it to enemy prisoners. The cinema wasn't just entertainment, it was a key re-education and propaganda tool. They used Hollywood anti-Nazi films, cartoons like Hair-Raising Hare, and the Why We Fight series. Most American World War II films shown focused on the Pacific War, not the European front. Even the projection equipment fascinated the prisoners. The camps used 16mm Bell and Howell projectors, machines that ran so smoothly and quietly. German technicians, who prided themselves on mechanical excellence, spent hours studying how they were built. Unteroffizier Friedrich Becker, an engineer from Zeiss Optical Works, noted, "The precision of American projectors was better than anything we made. They ran for hours without overheating, and the sound synchronization was perfect." We started to realize American technical superiority extended to every field. Now, let's jump to October 3, 1943, back at Camp Hearne. The prisoners there had a theater with an orchestra pit where they put on elaborate skits and plays. But tonight, German POWs packed the theater for a special screening, MGM's Academy Award-winning drama Mrs. Miniver, about British resilience during the Blitz.
Hauptmann Eric Muller, à Luftwaffe Pilot Wood et Bombay London, Satin the Third Row.
"We destroyed British cities. We knew the damage we'd caused," he later said. Yet here was a film showing British courage with such sympathy, such humanity, that German soldiers were weeping for British civilians. Even Joseph Goebbels grudgingly admitted the drama's power. Mrs. Miniver shows the destiny of a family during the war, and its refined, powerful propagandistic tendency is something we've only dreamed of. There's not a single angry word against Germany, yet the anti-German message comes through perfectly. The film's technical brilliance, Joseph Ruttenberg's cinematography, Herbert Stotthart's score, the seamless editing, showed a level of filmmaking German cinema couldn't touch. More troubling for the prisoners was its emotional pull. These Wehrmacht officers, many of whom had participated in the London raids, found themselves sympathizing with the victims. Winston Churchill once said this film did more for the war effort than a flotilla of destroyers. Now the German prisoners understood why. November 1943 marked a turning point in the film program. The Special Projects Division of the Provost Marshal General's Office decided to start showing Frank Capra's Why We Fight series to German POWs. It was a controversial call. These films used captured German footage, including scenes from Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, and turned it against the Nazis. Academy Award-winning director Frank Capra had been daunted but impressed by Riefenstahl's 1935 propaganda film, and he set out to respond. His goal? Let the enemy prove to our soldiers the enormity of his cause and the justness of ours. He compiled enemy speeches, films, newsreels, and newspaper articles, along with a list of their hostile actions. Camps like McCain, housing 7,700 prisoners, Clinton, 3,400, and Shelby, 5,300 started screening the series. At Camp McCain near Grenada, Mississippi, the first showing of Prelude to War caused an uproar. SS officers tried to organize a boycott, but they were immediately transferred to Camp Alva, Oklahoma, a special detention center for unrepentant Nazis. Most prisoners, though, watched transfixed as their own propaganda was turned into evidence against them. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann wrote, "To see the Nuremberg rallies, events that filled us with pride, presented as proof of our militaristic aggression. It was like watching your life through a different lens. Everything was the same, yet completely reversed." The series gave German POWs something they'd never had: context for Germany's actions. Many had never seen the full scope of Nazi rallies, heard complete Hitler speeches, or understood how their nation looked to the rest of the world. Here's the thing that shocked German POWs more than anything: Hollywood's willingness to criticize America itself. In December 1943, Camp Shelby showed John Ford's The Grapes of Wrath, a film about American poverty during the Great Depression, criticizing banks and authorities, and sympathizing with ordinary people. It defied everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about American capitalism. Oberfeldwebel Friedrich Hoffmann, a former Nazi Party education officer, noted, "They show their own failures, their own injustices." No German film under Hitler could show German poverty or suffering caused by German institutions. This self-criticism wasn't weakness, it was a strength we couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, camp libraries were flooded with requests for John Steinbeck's novel. Within months, prisoners formed translation circles, creating handwritten German versions of American literature they discovered through films. And the American camp authorities didn't ban it, they encouraged it. Major Edward Davidson, chief of the Special Projects Division's education program, reported in January 1944, prisoners' consumption of American literature has increased 400% since we expanded the film program. They want to read the sources of the films. Gone with the Wind sparked requests for books about the American Civil War. The Grapes of Wrath made them curious about the Depression. An unexpected catalyst for change came from Walt Disney. In February 1944, Camp Hearne started showing Disney animations before feature films: Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia. These weren't propaganda, they were pure entertainment. But their impact was huge. Hauptmann Otto Klockner said, "To see Fantasia, this mix of animation and classical music, Bach and Beethoven interpreted through American imagination, it destroyed our idea that American culture was inferior. The technical mastery, the artistic vision, the sheer joy of creation, we had nothing like it." Disney also made animations for the Why We Fight series, but it was the feature films that touched the prisoners most. Many had children in Germany they hadn't seen in years, and these family-friendly films hit an emotional chord that propaganda never could. Unteroffizier Werner Braun, an artist from Munich, spent weeks trying to figure out Disney's animation techniques. American animators were decades ahead of us. If they could do this with cartoons, what else were they capable of? Even running the projectors became an education. German POWs were often assigned to projection duty, maintaining and operating equipment that showed off American manufacturing excellence. The Army Motion Picture Service distributed 16mm prints to military installations worldwide, and by March 1944, camps were getting films within 2 weeks of their theatrical release. These camps had almost everything a small town had: dentists, doctors, libraries, educational classes. English was the most popular, and athletics. Soccer was big at Camp Shelby. Gerhard Helmuth Wagner, a former projectionist at Berlin's UFA studios, documented the American distribution system. Every week, new films arrived, not propaganda ministry picks, but regular Hollywood productions, musicals, westerns, comedies, dramas. The variety was incredible. In Germany, we might see 12 different films a year. Here, we saw that many in a month. Even the film stock impressed them. They couldn't believe it survived thousands of showings without deteriorating, something German chemistry couldn't match. Dr. Friedrich Müller, a chemist from IG Farben at Camp Clinton, studied Technicolor with a magnifying glass during projection duty. The 3-strip color process requires precision we couldn't achieve. The chemical stability of the dyes, the alignment of multiple negatives, each step took years of development we hadn't done. Maybe no genre shocked German POWs more than American musicals. In May 1944, Camp Hearne showed Yankee Doodle Dandy, starring James Cagney as George M. Cohan. The big patriotic numbers, the energy of tap dancing, the way music blended with the story, it was entertainment as ideology, but so well done that even hostile audiences got swept up. Feldwebel Hans Richter said, "We'd been told Americans were uncultured. Then we saw Yankee Doodle Dandy, hundreds of dancers in perfect sync, songs that made you want to march even if you didn't want to, production values that must have cost a fortune. And this was just entertainment, not propaganda ministry stuff." Musicals also showed something else, American racial integration, even if it was limited. When Stormy Weather played at Camp Shelby in June 1944, starring Bill Robinson and Lena Horne, an all-black cast performing at the highest level, it challenged Nazi racial theories. America had its own racial problems, but the mere existence of such films, celebrating black artists, was unthinkable in Nazi Germany. Within 2 months of arriving, the German prisoners had decorated their mess halls with paintings, chandeliers, and Christmas ornaments, and hung family photos on the walls. The camps became communities where German culture mixed with American influences from films. By autumn 1944, American combat films started arriving, but they weren't about fighting Germans. The Special Projects Division avoided those to prevent resentment. Instead, they showed Pacific War films, letting German POWs see American military power without feeling targeted. Guadalcanal Diary showed American improvisation and determination. 30 Seconds over Tokyo demonstrated bombing capabilities the Luftwaffe couldn't match. Action in the North Atlantic highlighted the merchant marine's heroism keeping supply lines open. Korvettenkapitän Otto von Minden, a U-boat commander at Camp Clinton, watched action in the North Atlantic with professional interest. The film shows anti-submarine tactics we never encountered. Either it's Hollywood fantasy, or the Americans have capabilities we didn't know about. Given everything else we've seen, I'm afraid it's the latter. These films also humanized American soldiers. German POWs who'd been told Americans were cowards saw depictions of individual courage that matched their own warrior ideals. April 1945 brought the end of the war in Europe, and the most devastating films German POWs would ever see. As American forces liberated concentration camps, the Signal Corps filmed what they found. Within weeks, those films were playing in POW camps. Prisoners called them no films, films of bones, shocked, angry, and disbelieving. But many accepted them as true. After watching an atrocity film, 1,000 prisoners at Camp Butner burned their German uniforms. At Camp Shelby on May 15, 1945, the screening started with an announcement. What you're about to see was filmed by American Signal Corps cameramen. No scenes were staged. No images were altered. The theater, usually noisy with conversation, was silent except for sobbing. Some prisoners insisted the footage was faked, but American authorities didn't punish them. They showed evidence. German documents, American soldier testimonies, more footage from multiple camps. The proof was overwhelming. By June 1945, the film program was central to the massive re-education effort. Der Ruf, The Call, was a German-language newspaper published by captured POWs at Fort Kearny in Rhode Island, distributed to 140 other POW camps across the U.S. It ran 26 issues and even made a small profit, no cost to American taxpayers. The paper started reviewing films and discussing what they meant for Germany's future. A typical August 1945 review said, "These films show American soldiers coming home, struggling with peace, questioning their sacrifice. That America would make films showing doubt and difficulty instead of victory parades demonstrates a maturity we must learn." Democracy means telling the truth, even uncomfortable truth. The prisoners chosen to write for Der Ruff were an intellectual elite, selected for their anti-Nazi views. These writers, artists, and professors became film critics, shaping how hundreds of thousands of German POWs understood American cinema. Their main goal: persuade POWs to focus on rebuilding Germany and abandon Nazi ideas. No director influenced German POWs more than Frank Capra. His films, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Meet John Doe, You Can't Take It With You, showed an America that was both idealized and self-critical, patriotic yet questioning. Capra was one of America's top directors in the 1930s, winning 3 Academy Awards for Best Director. His vision of American democracy, filtered through Hollywood's warmth, became the template for how many German POWs understood American values. Even George Marshall and President Roosevelt recognized Capra as Hollywood's top communicator. For German POWs, his films were like textbooks in democratic thinking, showing corruption defeated by decency, individual courage against systemic power, and democracy as something perfectible, not perfect. Another unexpected source of ideological change: Westerns. John Ford's Stagecoach, Howard Hawks' Red River. These films showed individual freedom, frontier justice, and self-reliance that resonated with German military values while pushing back against Nazi collectivism. Major Friedrich Fontaine observed, "The Western hero, alone principled, fighting for justice without orders from above." This was the opposite of our military culture, yet we admired these figures. They represented a freedom we didn't understand. The Western landscape itself made an impact: vast spaces, unlimited horizons, a sense of possibility that contrasted sharply with the cramped, controlled world of Nazi Germany. Films became windows into physical and psychological freedom German soldiers had never imagined. At Camp Shelby, prisoners even started writing their own westerns set in Germany, imagining lone heroes fighting authoritarian forces. It was the start of democratic thinking among former Wehrmacht soldiers. German prisoners at Camp Hearne included a military orchestra with their instruments, and they provided much of the camp's entertainment. These musicians started incorporating American musical styles from films, jazz rhythms in their compositions, swing arrangements replacing martial music. Hauptmann Ernst Müller, the orchestra's conductor, said, "American film music showed us possibilities we never imagined, mixing classical and popular forms, emotional directness, technical sophistication. It was a musical democracy where different styles coexisted and made each other better." By late 1945, POW orchestras were playing American film scores for other prisoners. Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz became especially popular, its lyrics striking a chord with men far from home. Hollywood's portrayal of women also hit hard. Stars like Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, and Joan Crawford played independent, intelligent women, nothing like the Nazi ideal of femininity. Woman of the Year, shown at Camp Clinton in September 1944, depicted a female journalist more successful than her husband, unthinkable in Nazi Germany. Seeing women as protagonists, not just decoration, suggested a society where potential wasn't limited by gender. For men raised in a rigidly patriarchal system, this was revolutionary. Some rejected it, but many started questioning the limitations on their own wives and daughters. American comedies did what no propaganda could, made German POWs laugh at authority and pretension. The Marx Brothers, Abbott and Costello, Bob Hope, these comedians used humor to tear down dignity. Duck Soup, shown at Camp Hearne despite concerns about its anti-war message, had German officers laughing at the absurdity of military pageantry. Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator finally played in October 1945. The reaction was mixed. Some were offended. Others found it cathartic to laugh at what had terrorized them. Chaplin's final speech, a plea for humanity over hatred, was translated and passed around in handwritten copies throughout the camps. Alongside Hollywood entertainment, POWs watched American documentaries showing industrial and agricultural capacity. Films like The City, The River, and The Plow That Broke the Plains. These government-produced films showed American successes and failures honestly, without the crude propaganda tone of Nazi documentaries. Dr. Heinrich Bauer, an agricultural specialist from East Prussia, watched The River with professional interest. It showed American flooding problems, erosion, agricultural failures, but also solutions being put in place. In Germany, we'd never admit such failures. This honesty about problems, combined with confidence in solving them, was more convincing than any boasting. The Hollywood star system also fascinated German POWs. The idea that actors were celebrities independent of state control, choosing their own roles, criticizing studios, even mocking political leaders, was a kind of freedom Nazis couldn't comprehend. When they learned Clark Gable had enlisted as a private and flown combat missions, or that James Stewart was bombing Germany, it shattered their image of American celebrities as decadent cowards. Marlene Dietrich, the German actress who became an American citizen and entertained troops, was especially controversial. Her films were both loved and hated, seen by some as betrayal and others as courage. By Christmas 1945, the cumulative effect of hundreds of Hollywood films had done what military defeat couldn't: transformed the minds of most German POWs. A survey of 22,000 prisoners found 74% left with an appreciation for democracy and friendly feelings toward their captors, while only 10% remained die-hard Nazis. The Special Projects Division's final report said, "Motion pictures proved our most effective tool for showing American values. Films did what lectures, books, and discussions couldn't. They made prisoners feel American democracy, not just understand it intellectually." After returning to Germany, former POWs like Andreas and Richter, along with others from Fort Kearny, founded a new newspaper also called Der Ruf, which grew to 100,000 subscribers. These former prisoners later started Group 47, which dominated German literature for decades. Christmas 1945 was a culmination of the film program's impact. Special holiday screenings featured films like Going My Way and Holiday Inn, showing American celebrations and values. At Camp Hearne, thousands of German prisoners watched these films depicting ordinary American life, its hopes and struggles. The technical achievements, elaborate production numbers, sophisticated cinematography, and emotional storytelling showed American filmmaking at its best. But it was the humanity of these films that touched them most, showing a society that could celebrate even amid hardship. In 1946, as German POWs started returning to Germany, they carried memories of American films that would shape their nation's reconstruction. Many rose to prominent positions in West German society, bringing lessons from those dark American theaters. Remember, the Geneva Conventions guaranteed POWs food, clothing, and medical care equal to their captors. But these men got something more: a cultural education that influenced Germany's democratic development. The impact wasn't just on elites. Thousands of ordinary German soldiers went home with changed views. They'd seen racial integration in musicals, women's independence in comedies, workers' dignity in dramas. These images stayed with them. American films didn't just change German prisoners. Their reactions changed American understanding of cultural diplomacy. The program's success shaped American occupation policy, leading to America houses across Germany where civilians could watch American films. The Motion Picture Export Association increased distribution of American films in post-war Germany, and by 1950, American films dominated German theaters, continuing the cultural transformation that started in POW camps. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of the war's end, surviving German POWs held a reunion at Camp Hearne. Over 300 former prisoners returned, many bringing their families to show them where their transformation began. Hans Müller, a former Obergefreiter who became a film distributor in Hamburg, spoke at the reunion. "We came to America as enemies, as Nazis, believers in racial and cultural superiority. We left as friends, as Democrats, as men who'd seen through cinema's window a better way to live." The reunion included screenings of films they'd watched 40 years earlier: Mrs. Miniver, Why We Fight, Casablanca. Former enemies, now allies, watched together, united in recognizing cinema's transformative power. Wilhelm Richter, the former Hauptmann, gave the keynote address. "Hollywood gave us what no military victory could, a vision of what we could become. We saw in American films not perfection, but possibility, not propaganda, but dreams made visible. The films showed us strength comes from diversity, prosperity from freedom, and culture flourishes without state control." Let's talk about the scale of this film program. It was systematic. Over 380 camps had projection facilities, with an average of 4 screenings a week. The Army Motion Picture Service distributed 16mm prints, and thousands of films were shown between 1943 and 1946. Estimates say German POWs watched millions of films individually. Each prisoner saw 150 to 200 films during captivity. They showed everything: new releases, classics, Hollywood entertainment, and documentaries. The cultural impact was huge. Thousands joined film discussion groups. De Ruff published extensive reviews. Many prisoners kept personal logs of films they watched, and the experience influenced their post-war careers. Psychological studies later confirmed Hollywood films had a deeper impact on German POWs minds than formal education programs. Films bypassed intellectual defenses, reaching the emotional core where ideology lives. They worked in many ways, creating emotional connections with American characters, showing alternative social systems, demonstrating prosperity without conquest, and presenting individual freedom as strength, not chaos. Entertainment made American culture likable in a way propaganda never could. Different genres hit prisoners differently. Musicals showed joy that challenged stereotypes. Westerns celebrated individual freedom that resonated with military honor, while pushing back against collectivism. Comedies taught that authority could be mocked without revolution. Dramas showed psychological depth equal to European art films, and war films humanized American soldiers without demonizing enemies. Each genre carried subtle ideological messages that added up to a complete worldview shift. The variety itself, American society's ability to produce such different expressions, showed a pluralistic culture foreign to Nazi uniformity. Beyond culture, American films provided technical education that helped rebuild Germany. Prisoners studied cinematography, sound design, color technology, special effects, and distribution systems. Many former POWs got jobs in the film industry, bringing American methods to German productions and helping modernize German cinema in the 1950s. Films also taught democracy through storytelling, not speeches. Hollywood films usually showed individual agency, social mobility through hard work, institutional criticism and reform, pluralistic values, and redemption through growth. These repeated narrative patterns created new ways of thinking about society. They even taught economics. Prisoners observed consumer culture, labor relations, entrepreneurship, and market systems operating independently of government. This knowledge proved valuable when they helped rebuild West Germany's economy. Many credited American films with helping them understand the market mechanisms that drove the economic miracle. The impact of these films extended far beyond imprisonment. Former POWs became political leaders bringing democratic values to German governance, educators teaching American studies, business leaders applying entrepreneurial models, cultural producers making films influenced by Hollywood, and social reformers advocating changes inspired by American social films. The transformation was so complete that by 1950, West Germany was America's strongest ally in Europe. Historians call the film program one of the most successful soft power operations in history. Without coercion or traditional propaganda, American commercial entertainment changed enemy minds. Remember, these German POWs lived in barracks holding up to 50 men. Every 5 barracks had a mess hall with cooks, waiters, silverware, and by all accounts, excellent food. But beyond physical comfort, they got cultural exposure that changed their worldview. The program succeeded because it relied on attraction, not argument. Films didn't tell prisoners what to think. They showed them different ways to think. Entertainment became education. Stories became ideology. Dreams became political transformation. On April 15, 1946, the last group of German POWs at Camp Hearne prepared to go home. The final film shown was The Best Years of Our Lives, depicting American veterans struggling with peace, an honest portrayal that resonated with men facing an uncertain return. As the credits rolled, the lights came up in the Camp Hearne theater for the last time. German prisoners filed out not as the Nazi warriors who'd arrived 3 years earlier, but as men transformed by Hollywood's dream factory. They'd been stunned, educated, and ultimately converted by the simple act of watching movies. Their story is proof of culture's power over ideology, of soft power's triumph over force, of the profound truth that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb, it's a well-told story. German POWs arrived in America expecting a weak, divided nation. Instead, through Hollywood's lens, they discovered a civilization confident enough to criticize itself, prosperous enough to afford pure entertainment, and sophisticated enough to produce art that transcended propaganda. They watched American films, and they were never the same. In their transformation lay the seeds of the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and Germany's democratic reconstruction. They saw democracy on screen, and they spent the rest of their lives trying to make it real. One movie at a time, they helped build a better world.